What's up, everybody? Tricks Ridiculous back with another video. So Crystal Dynamics has told us that the next patch will include buffs to all heroes. Every hero on the roster will be receiving at least 2 different buffs. Some will receive even more than that, but nobody will be getting nerfed. So in this video, I'll be talking about what buffs I want to see across each hero. Before we do, be sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, and join the Discord. Link is in the description. Also, I just opened up a new subscriber tier at just 99 cents. So if you want to support the channel even further, consider joining the Dollar Sub Club. So, I'm actually really excited for this patch, and I do feel it has been a little bit overshadowed by the announcement of Winter Soldier and the cloning labs. I really don't see anybody else kind of talking about this buff patch. And believe me, I'm also extremely hyped for Winter Soldier especially, and also the cloning labs, but I do feel that this buff patch can actually make some huge waves in the game. There are several characters that are in desperate need of a retuning, and if Crystal Dynamics pulls it off successfully, it could significantly shake up the meta and get some less loved characters right back up into the higher tiers. Now, a few things right off the bat. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know I've been a huge advocate for a melee buff across the board. We all know melee is substantially worse than ranged across the board, right? Yes, there are some characters that can function as melee characters, but even the best melee characters are worse than most ranged characters, assuming both are built optimally, right? And I do hope that this buff patch comes with some type of blanket melee buff across the board, as I do believe that will give most of the lower powered characters in this game the most bang for their buck in terms of buffs, right? Also, I know there will be outliers to this list. If I feel a character needs more buffs than another, I'm coming at it in the most general sense across the player base. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to come at me with, oh, character X isn't underpowered because I know a guy who has a build that can do super adaptoid in 5 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Yes, there are crazy builds that you can make with every character to get through content, but on the whole, some characters are just weaker than others, and that's what I want to address here. And lastly, I'm trying to think outside the box when it comes to buffs, thinking of more unique things rather than just turning up the damage numbers and turning up the durations of buffs. And I really hope that Crystal Dynamics is putting in that type of effort too. So let's get into it. Now, the first group I'm going to talk about is actually the group that I don't think needs almost any buffs, essentially the highest tier of characters. And those, of course, are Thor, the Mighty Thor, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Kamala Khan. Truthfully, I can't even think of what they will do to buff Thor or the Mighty Thor. Possibly undoing Thor's critical throw stealth nerf that came a patch or two ago, and possibly for the Mighty Thor, maybe increasing the tracking on her power throw, so maybe it hits more targets. That could be an interesting way to give her another ranged option. But honestly, both of those characters are right up at the top of the meta, so there's really not much that I can think of that they can do. For Iron Man, we know that a nerf to his rocket spam is on the way. And while rockets will still be very good on Iron Man, lasers are definitely going to move up the ranks. But what I'd like to actually see is a buff to his repulsors. Right now, there's almost no good reason to use repulsors over lasers or rockets. So a change there would really shake up some Iron Man builds. Hawkeye is already completely bonkers for DPS, but like everyone else, he could use some assistance in the melee department. Another spicy change they could do is increase the damage of his ultimate arrow. They increased it a little bit prior to, or since his launch, I should say, but it's still primarily used to really apply the shock status effect so that you can then follow up, with your split shot arrow for your real damage. So it's really more of a setup effect than anything. If they increased it a little bit more, it could be a major damage dealer, and it could have some automatic crowd control elements to his kit going on, which I think would be a pretty cool way to play. And Kamala Khan, my last S tier character. I think Kamala is one of the most slept on characters in the game. If they were going to buff her, what I would actually like to see is a little more immunity to stagger, stun, and other crowd control effects while she's in Embiggen. When the game actually first launched, if you kind of went and looked in her skill tree at the tooltip for Embiggen, it actually said that she was immune to knockback, immune to stun, immune to freeze, immune to all those different little things that, immune to gravitas or whatever. It said all of that. Now, we know that that wasn't the case, right? So people kind of brought that up, and instead of addressing it and actually making it so that was the case, Crystal Dynamics actually just edited the tooltip to remove those things from the tooltip, so the tooltip actually matched what it did in game versus actually making the in game match the tooltip. But if they can go back on that and actually, because we know at this point that was something they had in mind for her ultimate. I think if she was more of just an unstoppable force while she was in Embiggen, just unable to be interrupted, unable to be stunned, I think that could go really well with her kit. I think that would definitely make her a force to be reckoned with. She still wouldn't be the highest damage dealer in the game, but she'd be able to get to her, light combo finisher a lot more easily. She'd be able to hold enemies, without getting interrupted on that. So I think that would be a really good change to her. And I think that's something a little unique, like I said, versus just upping damage numbers. So on to the characters that probably need a buff the most, and that would be Captain America, Kate Bishop, Black Panther, Hulk, and Spider-Man. Now, Captain America can desperately do with a melee buff, but in addition to that, prior to the launch of the game, his rally cry heroic was actually tooltipped to give all heroes a higher regeneration rate of their heroic abilities. And then they kind of went back. So that was their initial plan for his rally cry heroic, and then they switched it prior to the game actually coming out. If they add that back to his rally cry, in addition to what it already does, which is allow enemies to take more damage, I think that would really propel Captain America to be one of the pinnacles of support characters. And in my opinion, I'm fine with a character like Captain America not being the highest damage dealer in the game. So Crystal Dynamics should embrace his role as the team captain and make him that top tier support character. Another thought I had would be to make enemies hit by his steamroller take a little more damage from all characters for a short period of time. I think that would really, his Brooklyn Brawler is already a pretty good heroic, like I said, can do with a melee buff overall, but I think his rally cry and his steamroller, if you can kind of give those a little more bang for their buck, I think that would make him a much more complete character. Now, Kate Bishop is a pretty strong character overall, but she does have a few glaring shortfalls. She's kind of one note in her scatter shot arrow. I'd really like to see a major buff to both her decoy and her ultimate heroics right now, as they're borderline useless and really just used for traversal more than anything. I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I'm playing Kate Bishop, I pretty much only use her assault heroic and occasionally her decoy, but really not for much. I almost never use her ultimate unless I'm trying to get across a large gap in the raid or something like that. Now, Black Panther could also do with a boost to melee damage like any of these melee-based characters, but is otherwise not too bad of a character. His heroics are all pretty solid. What I'd be really interested in is to see his Kapinga daggers get an upgrade, as these are largely unused by the community. These are the other types of ranged weapons that he can do, in addition to just the original daggers that everyone uses, that kind of just it throws 2 and then it throws 3 of them, and it kind of buffs your melee damage. That's what everyone uses right now, even for ranged Black Panther builds. I find those daggers a little blah, a little boring. I think the Kapinga daggers are more interesting, but I think they need a bit of a boost to give him a more interesting ranged option. Now, Hulk is a fairly strong character, but he is one of the clunkiest characters. I'll go so far as to say he is the clunkiest character in the game. I think his melee animations need to be sped up a bit. It takes him a seriously long time to get anything going with both his power attacks and his light combo finisher, especially with a small rock. If these moves came out a little bit faster, he'd be a bit more reliable in combat. Also, he desperately needs a traversal upgrade, probably more than any other character. He desperately needs to jump higher and farther. We all know that flyers are a premium benefit to the characters that can fly. They're sought after heavily in endgame content. And although Hulk will never be a flyer, his lack of mobility is almost a detriment to the team at times. Spider-Man can be a pretty sweet support character and also a damage dealer when built optimally. But I will say his web shooters feel like one of the clunkiest ranged attacks I've ever used, maybe in any video game. And I also don't really see anyone use the other two types of web shooters. I think it's like the web spread and the web trap. I'd like to see really just a total overhaul to Spider-Man's ranged game to make those things usable, because right now, I mean, they're basically not used by the community at all. So I think that's something that, you know, they could probably take a look at rather than just leaving those things in the dust. And lastly, that leaves us with Black Widow. So Widow is a very solid character. She's extremely strong from ranged. She can be used melee, although she could probably, like everyone, use a melee buff, but certainly not bad from melee. But the one thing that they need to do with Widow is make her invisibility work. Okay, guys, that's every character. We will see what Crystal Dynamics does, but I think some buffs like the ones I mentioned would really open up some characters, make them feel fresh, make them feel new, and get some of those less loved characters to be played more and kind of get people thinking, oh, you know, how can we make different builds? Let me know in the comments what types of buffs you'd like to see for different characters. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, join the Discord, and join the new $1 sub club. That's it for me, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.